My world shattered on a Tuesday. Not with a bang, but with 1,000 tiny taps on my phone screen. Each one a notification from my bank. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm coffee, scrolling through my newsfeed, when the first one popped up. Purchase alert, $450 at Luxe Boutique. I blinked. Luxe Boutique. I hadn't bought anything from there. My wife Sarah, maybe, but she usually told me about big purchases. Then another alert, purchase alert, $780 at Designer Shoes Emporium. My stomach clenched. This was wrong, very wrong. I hadn't used that card in days. I hadn't even seen it. A cold dread started creeping up my spine. I opened my banking app, my fingers trembling slightly. What I saw made the blood drain from my face. My credit card, the one with the highest limit, was maxed out, and not just one, two of them. Both reported stolen just last week. I'd been so careful. After a few smaller suspicious charges had popped up on my statements a while ago. Things I didn't recognize. Small amounts that were easy to overlook. I'd gotten paranoid. I'd called the bank, explained my concerns, and had them cancel and reissue new cards for all my accounts. It wasn't because I suspected Sarah, not really. It was just a gut feeling, a general sense of unease. I'd received the new cards just a few days ago, signed them, and put them securely in my wallet, which I always kept on my dresser. I remembered specifically that they were there yesterday morning. I was sure. So how could they be maxed out today? Thousands of dollars in debt on cards that were supposed to be locked down by a fraud report. The bank representative, a woman with a surprisingly calm voice named Brenda, listened patiently as I stammered through my panicked explanation. Sir, I understand this is distressing, but according to our records, these purchases were made after you reported the cards stolen. We flagged them as fraudulent transactions the moment they went through. That's why you are receiving the alerts. But that's impossible. I practically yelled into the phone, my voice cracked. They were new cards. I hadn't even used them yet. How could someone use them if they were reported stolen and cancelled? Brenda explained that while the old cards were cancelled, the new ones had been active for a few days. And my fraud report on the old ones didn't automatically cancel the new ones unless I specifically requested it. Which I hadn't. My heart sank. So, the thief had somehow gotten their hands on my brand new cards, the ones I thought were safe. And they had gone on a spree. A massive, horrifying, bank-breaking spree. My mind raced, trying to piece together the timeline. I reported the old cards stolen last Wednesday. The new ones arrived Friday. I activated them and put them in my wallet on Friday night. I hadn't touched them since. So the spending must have happened sometime between Friday and now Tuesday. Charges were for high-end fashion, jewelry, expensive dinners, and even a weekend stay at a fancy hotel, an hour out of town. The names of the establishments were all things Sarah had mentioned wanting to visit, places her friends raved about. A cold, heavy stone settled in my chest. Number it couldn't be, not Sarah. We had our problems, sure. We argued about money sometimes. She had a tendency to be impulsive, but she would never ever do something like this. She wouldn't steal from me, would she? I looked around our quiet kitchen, at the photos on the fridge, at the little plant Sarah had insisted on buying. This house, this life, we built it together. The idea that she could be behind this was like a physical blow. But who else? Who else had access to my wallet, to my dresser, to my life? I felt a wave of nausea. I had to confront her. But how? What if it wasn't her? What if I accused her and it turned out to be someone else? Or a genuine breach? The thought made me sick. But the alternative, doing nothing, Letting this fester was worse. I checked the time. Sarah was at her book club meeting. She wouldn't be home for another hour or so. That gave me a little time. Time to breathe. Time to try and make sense of this madness. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a terrifying mosaic. Sarah's new friends, the ones she'd met at the gym, were all about designer brands and lavish lifestyle. She'd been spending more time with them lately, coming home giddy with stories of their shopping trips and expensive brunches. She'd been dropping hints saying, "Oh, so-and-so just got this amazing bag. Wouldn't it be great? And we should really treat ourselves more often. Life's too short." I'd laughed it off, told her we needed to be careful with our budget. The realization hit me like a train, the charges that had prompted me to report my cards stolen in the first place. The small, unrecognizable ones. What if those weren't a random hacker? What if those were the tests? What if she had taken my old cards, made a few small purchases, and then, when I reported them stolen, she just waited for the new ones to arrive? No, that didn't make sense. She didn't know I'd reported them stolen, that was the whole point. The logical conclusion, the one my heart was desperately fighting, was that Sarah, my wife, had somehow gotten hold of my new active credit cards and had gone on a massive spending spree, completely unaware that I had reported the previous card stolen, and that the bank was now flagging these new purchases as fraud. The irony was brutal, stomach-churning. She didn't know these purchases were now officially illegal, a crime. She didn't know she had just committed financial fraud against her own husband. She didn't know she had just destroyed our lives, all for a few hours of extravagant shopping. The silence in the house felt deafening, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. I pulled up the detailed transaction list on my banking app. Each line item was a punch to the gut. $120 zero at Sparkle Jewelers. $300 for a Michelin star dinner. $800 for a weekend spa package. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. This wasn't just a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act, a massive betrayal. And she was walking back into this house, probably in an hour, completely oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed. I stood up, walked to the dresser, and checked my wallet. Just as I suspected. Empty. My new credit cards were gone, all of them. And my world, my once stable, predictable world, was gone too. The phone rang. It was Brenda from the bank. "Mr. Davies, the police have been notified. These transactions are part of a larger fraud investigation. They'll be in touch." My breath caught in my throat. The police. This wasn't just about debt anymore. This was a crime. And my wife was the prime suspect, completely unaware she had just landed herself in a world of legal trouble. The heartbreak was so immense, it was physical. I felt like I was drowning. The phone call with Brenda ended, but the ringing in my ears continued. The police fraud investigation. The words bounced around my skull like angry hornets. I sat back down, the chair scraping loudly on the tiled floor. My mind was a whirlwind of frantic thoughts. What do I do? What do I say? Do I protect her? Do I tell the truth? How do I even begin to untangle this mess? I stared blankly at the kitchen counter, seeing but not processing the fruit bowl, the neatly stacked mail. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Sarah, my Sarah, couldn't be a criminal. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 5. We had dreams, plans, we wanted to start a family. All of it felt like a sick joke now. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Sarah. "Hey, book club was so fun. Grabbing groceries on the way home. Need anything? A wave of icy nausea washed over me. Groceries. As if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just blown up our entire financial future. And possibly her own freedom. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, unable to type a reply. How could I act normal? How could I look her in the eye? I knew I needed to gather more information. Concrete proof, before she walked through that door. I pulled out my laptop, my hands still shaking, and opened our shared online bank accounts. I scrolled through the recent transactions on all accounts, not just the maxed out credit cards. Sure enough, more charges popped up, smaller ones, but still substantial. My debit card, which was linked to our joint checking account, had also seen activity. Purchases at a high-end salon, a boutique pet store, we didn't even have a pet, and several online shopping sites I didn't recognize. These were all recent, within the last 2 days. My heart sank further. This wasn't just a spontaneous splurge on the credit cards. This was an ongoing pattern. It meant she hadn't just found the cards and gone wild. It meant she had been deliberately, systematically spending our money, or my money, on things that were clearly not for our shared household. I clicked on a charge from Posh Spa and Retreat for $800. My mind immediately flashed back to a conversation Sarah had with her friend Chloe. Just last week, Chloe was always talking about her wellness weekends and luxurious spa treatments. Sarah had sighed, saying, "Oh, I wish I could do that." I remembered telling her we couldn't afford it right then. My blood ran cold. The charges. They were all connected to things Sarah had mentioned wanting, things her friends had. I opened our photo album on the computer, searching for recent pictures. Sarah was always snapping photos of her outings, with Chloe and the others. And there it was. A selfie of Sarah and Chloe, smiling, holding up shopping bags from Luxe Boutique and Designer Shoes Emporium. The date on the photo matched the dates of the largest credit card transactions. Sarah was wearing a new, brightly colored dress in the photo, one I hadn't seen before. I zoomed in. The dress had the tag of Chic Couture, another place on my statement. It was all there, laid bare, the undeniable proof. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a hacking. It was her. My wife. I closed the laptop with a heavy thud. The evidence was overwhelming, and the police were already involved. This was no longer just a domestic dispute. This was a legal nightmare. I began to pace the kitchen, running my hands through my hair. The police would contact me. They'd ask questions. If I said nothing, I would be complicit. If I told them it was Sarah, I would be turning in my own wife. The weight of that decision was crushing. A memory flashed through my mind. Last month, Sarah had complained about not having enough fun money. She said her friends were all doing these amazing things, and she felt left out. I'd explained our budget was tight, that we were saving for a down payment on a bigger house, saving for a future. She'd seemed to understand. Or so I thought. Was this her way of getting what she wanted? Was it resentment? Or was it something else, something deeper? A part of her I didn't know? I walked into our bedroom, my gaze going straight to the dresser where I kept my wallet. I rummaged through the drawers, looking for any other clues. Nothing obvious. But the empty space where my cards should have been screamed betrayal. I knew exactly where I had placed them, neatly tucked away in the card slots of my wallet. My mind raced back to the day I reported the first card stolen. It was last Wednesday. I'd been getting ready for work, and I distinctly remembered patting my wallet, feeling lighter than usual. I'd pulled it out, and the card slots were empty. Panicked. I'd searched everywhere, convinced I'd lost them on my commute the day before. I'd torn the house apart, even checked my car. Nothing. I genuinely believed they were gone. stolen from my car, or dropped somewhere. That's why I report. Then the new ones arrived, and I thought the problem was solved. I placed them in my wallet, relieved. Never in a million years did I think the thief would be living under the same roof as me. And never did I imagine she'd pick up the stolen ones. No, she didn't pick up the stolen ones. The old ones were stolen from my wallet last Wednesday, and I reported them. The new ones arrived Friday, and she must have taken those too sometime between Friday night, when I put them in my wallet, and now. So, she took the new cards, unknowingly, using ones that were now linked to a fraud investigation. The thought spun my head. The sound of keys jingling in the lock startled me. Sarah was home. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it, the moment of truth. I swallowed hard, trying to compose myself, but my hands were still shaking. How do I even begin this conversation? Hey honey, did you happen to max out my credit cards that I reported stolen last week? Completely unaware of the legal implications. It sounded insane. The front door opened. Honey, I am home. Sarah's cheerful voice echoed through the house. She walked into the kitchen carrying 2 grocery bags. She looked beautiful, innocent, smiling. My stomach churned. How could she be so normal, so oblivious? She looked at me, her smile faltering slightly. Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't hold her gaze. My voice was a strained whisper. Sarah, we need to talk. Sarah set the grocery bags down on the counter, her brows furrowed with concern. Talk? What's wrong, Alex? You are really pale. She reached out, her hand gently touching my arm. Her touch, usually so comforting, now felt alien, almost burning. I flinched slightly, pulling back. I am not okay, Sarah. Not at all. My voice was still low, raspy. I knew I couldn't beat around the bush, but the words felt lodged in my throat. She took a step back, her expression shifting from concern to confusion, then to a flicker of defensiveness. What is it? Did something happen at work? Is it the car? I shook my head slowly, forcing myself to meet her eyes. It's about the credit cards, Sarah. Her eyes widened, just for a split second, then quickly narrowed. The credit cards. What about them? Did you finally get the new ones activated? She tried to sound casual, but there was a stiffness to her posture, a tremor in her voice that I hadn't heard before. Yes, Sarah. I activated them on Friday, and this morning I got alerts. Lots of alerts. I watched her face, searching for any sign of understanding, of guilt, of anything. Her face remained a mask, but her eyes darted away towards the window, then back to me. Alerts? What kind of alerts? Fraud. She tried to sound curious, but her voice was too high, too forced. Yes, Sarah. Fraud. Massive fraud. Tens of thousands of dollars worth. Maxed out. All of them. On cards that I reported stolen last week. The last part came out harsher than I intended, laced with a bitter accusation. Her jaw dropped. Stolen. Alex, what are you talking about? You reported them stolen. Why? Her voice was louder now, tinged with disbelief, and a strange, almost theatrical surprise. 'Cause they were gone, Sarah. Last Wednesday, my old cards vanished from my wallet. I searched everywhere. I thought they were stolen, so I reported them. The bank cancelled them. They sent new ones. I put them in my wallet on Friday, and now those are gone too, and someone has spent a fortune on them. Her eyes went wide again, but this time it seemed like genuine shock. New ones? You mean you got new cards? And they're gone? Oh my God, Alex, this is terrible. We need to call the police. Someone broke in? Was anything else taken? She was trying to play the concerned wife, but the performance was too good, too immediate. It felt rehearsed. Police are already involved, Sarah. The bank reported it as part of a larger fraud investigation. They're looking into it, and they're going to ask questions. A lot of questions. My voice was a low growl now. And I already have some answers. Her face went utterly white. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking hollow. Answers? What are you talking about? Transactions, Sarah. The places where the money was spent. I took a deep breath, preparing for the emotional storm. Luxe Boutique. Designer Shoes Emporium. Sparkle Jewelers. Chic Couture. That expensive Michelin-star dinner. The posh spa and retreat weekend getaway. I watched her intently as I listed them. Each name a nail in the coffin of our marriage. With each name, her eyes flickered, her lips parted slightly as if to speak. But no sound came out. Remember that new dress you wore in your selfie with Chloe, Sarah? The one from Chic Couture? And those shopping bags you two were holding? The date on that photo matches the date of the transactions. The spa weekend? Chloe was just talking about that last week. You said you wished you could go. Her eyes, which had been locked onto mine, now darted wildly around the room, like a trapped animal. Her breathing became shallow and rapid. Alex, no, you don't understand. It's not what you think. I can explain. Please, just listen. Her voice was a desperate whisper, cracking with emotion. Explain what, Sarah? Explain how you ended up with my brand new credit cards that were sitting in my wallet. Explain how you went on a spending spree, completely unaware that I had reported the previous card stolen, and that every single one of these new purchases is now flagged as fraud. Explain how you, my wife, stole from me. My voice rose, unable to contain the pain and anger any longer. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her pale cheeks. Her body began to tremble. I didn't steal them, Alex, not like that. I saw them. In your wallet. I just wanted to feel good for a little while. Chloe and the girls, they're always buying these amazing things. I just wanted to fit in. I know it was wrong. So wrong. But I didn't know you'd reported them. I swear to God, I didn't know you'd reported them stolen. I thought they were just your regular cards. The confession hung in the air, a devastating silence. My chest tightened, a searing pain engulfing me. The very worst of my fears had been confirmed. She took them. She spent the money. She did it. My wife. So you just took them? My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The shock was turning into a cold, hard rage. You just reached into my wallet and took my credit cards. And then you went out and blew tens of thousands of dollars. Without a word, without a thought. For our future. For our savings. For everything we've worked for. She crumpled, sliding to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I am so sorry, Alex. I am so sorry. I know I messed up. I know it's unforgivable. I don't know what came over me. Chloe, she just kept saying, you deserve this, Sarah. Alex doesn't appreciate you. Treat yourself. And I just wanted to feel special for once. Her words, instead of softening me, hardened my resolve. Chloe, always Chloe. The friends who had clearly influenced her, egged her on, perhaps even participated in the spending. This wasn't just about Sarah's betrayal. This was about a calculated spree, fueled by external pressure and a desperate need for something she felt she lacked. You wanted to feel special, I scoffed, the sound bitter. You wanted to feel special, so you committed fraud. You used cards that were linked to a criminal investigation, completely oblivious to the fact that you were digging yourself and us into a hole so deep we might never get out. I looked down at her, curled in a ball on the floor, weeping. The image of the cheerful, loving wife I knew was gone, replaced by this broken, desperate woman. What were you thinking, Sarah? What were you thinking when you went to that jewelry store? What were you thinking when you went to that jewelry store? What were you thinking when you booked that expensive spa weekend? Did you ever stop to think about the consequences? About me, about our life. She shook her head, unable to speak, choked by sobs. The phone in my pocket vibrated. I knew who it was. The police. The moment was upon us. The choice I had to make. And looking at her, seeing the wreckage she had caused, not just financially, but emotionally, my decision was clear. The trust was shattered beyond repair, and the law, unfortunately, had to run its course. The vibrating phone felt like a hot coal in my pocket. It was an unknown number, but I knew. It was the police. I ignored it for now. My focus was entirely on Sarah, still huddled on the kitchen floor, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Get up, Sarah," I said, my voice cold and steady. The raw emotion had been replaced by a chilling calm. "This isn't going to fix anything." She slowly uncurled, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, eyes swollen. She looked utterly broken. But even in her brokenness, a part of me felt no pity, only a deep, profound sense of betrayal. "Alex, please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Don't do this, don't tell them. I can pay it back. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. Please." She reached out for my hand, but I pulled away. "Pay it back, Sarah." "With what?" "The cards are maxed. We have hardly any savings left in our joint account. You didn't just spend a few $100s. You spent tens of thousands. Our down payment for a house, gone. Our emergency fund depleted. Everything we worked for, gone. And all of it, Sarah, on cards that I had already reported stolen. Do you understand the gravity of that?" She flinched as I said, "Stolen again." "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "Why would you report them stolen without telling me, Sarah?" I shot back, the words laced with incredulity. "Why would you go on a spending spree with my cards? You knew our financial situation. You knew we were trying to save. You knew we had a budget. Why did you do it?" She started to explain, her words tumbling out in a desperate torrent. It was Chloe, Alex. She was always talking about her trips, her new bags, her designer clothes, and I felt so boring, so left out. She kept saying, "Sarah, you deserve to treat yourself. Alex works hard. He won't even notice a few hundred here and there. She said you were probably just being stingy, that you didn't appreciate how much I did for us. And then I saw your wallet on the dresser. I don't know," a voice in my head just said, "Take them. Just for a little bit. Just to try, to see what it felt like." "So you decided to steal from me because your friend told you I was stingy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was a flimsy, pathetic excuse. "And she encouraged you to blow tens of thousands of dollars. She was with you, wasn't she? At the boutique, at the spa, at the restaurant." Sarah nodded miserably. "Yes, she was there. She helped me pick things out. She said I looked amazing. She said it was our little secret. She said you'd never know, you were too busy with work." Cold anger, sharper than anything I had felt before, began to simmer within me. Chloe. This friend was a co-conspirator, a bad influence who had actively encouraged my wife to commit fraud against me. This wasn't just Sarah's mistake. It was a Calculated betrayal, orchestrated or at least heavily influenced by someone outside our marriage. So Chloe knew you were using my cards without my permission? I pressed, my voice dangerously quiet. Sarah hesitated, then mumbled. She knew I wasn't supposed to be spending like that. She said it was borrowing, and that you'd never miss it. Borrowing? You call maxing out 2 credit cards and draining our savings borrowing, Sarah? And you thought I wouldn't miss it? Are you insane? I couldn't keep the fury out of my voice any longer. She recoiled, her head shaking. No, I thought I'd stop after a little bit. But then it felt so good, and Chloe was so encouraging. She said it was empowering to take control of my finances. She even said she'd lend me money to pay some back if I needed to, but she never did. She just kept pushing me to buy more. Empowering. I almost laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Empowering to destroy your husband's financial stability and potentially land yourself in jail. Sarah gasped, her eyes wide. Jail? Alex, please. No, it won't come to that, will it? I am your wife. You won't press charges, will you? The question hung heavy in the air. The unspoken plea, the expectation that I would cover for her, protect her from the consequences of her actions. My heart ached, twisted by the conflict. Part of me, the part that still loved the woman I married, wanted to shield her. But another part, the part that had just been utterly violated and betrayed, screamed for justice. Police are already involved, Sarah, I repeated, my voice firm. The bank has flagged these transactions. This isn't just me pressing charges. This is a fraud investigation. And if I lie to them, if I try to cover for you, I become an accomplice. Do you understand that? I could lose everything too. My job, my reputation, my freedom. Her face crumpled again, a fresh wave of tears cascading down her cheeks. No, Alex, please, think about us. Think about our future. We can fix this. Please, just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave me permission, please. I didn't give you permission, Sarah. You took them. And you spent wildly. And you did it while those cards were officially considered stolen. That's the cold, hard truth. My voice was devoid of emotion now, a complete blank. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling towards me, grabbing my arms. Alex, no, don't you dare. Don't you dare tell them I'll never forgive you. I'll hate you. This will destroy us. It will destroy me. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin. I gently, but firmly, pushed her away. It's already destroyed us, Sarah. You destroyed us, not me. Not by reporting the cards stolen when I genuinely believed they were gone, but by taking them, by betraying my trust, by emptying our accounts, by turning my financial security into a crime scene. The phone in my pocket vibrated again. This time, I pulled it out. It was a local number, followed by a text. Detective Miller. Regarding your credit card fraud report. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. Sarah saw the phone, saw the text. Her eyes widened in panic. No. Don't answer it, Alex. Please. She tried to grab the phone from my hand, but I pulled away too quickly. I took a deep breath, looking at my wife for what felt like the last time. The woman I loved, the woman who had just committed a serious crime against me, was standing before me, begging. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that there was no going back from this. I have to, Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I have to. For myself, for my future, for everything you just took from me. And with that, I hit the call button, listening to the dial tone. the sound echoing in the silence of our shattered home. The dial tone seemed to stretch on forever, a prelude to the end of everything I knew. Sarah stood frozen, watching me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. She couldn't believe I was actually doing it. And honestly, a part of me couldn't either. But the other part, the part that felt so deeply wronged, so utterly violated, knew there was no other choice. "Detective Miller," I said into the phone, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. "This is Alex Davies. You just called me regarding the fraud report." As I spoke, Sarah gasped, a small choked sound. She slowly backed away from me, her eyes never leaving my face. The police officer on the other end was professional calm. He asked me to confirm my identity and the details of the report. I did. He then asked if I had any further information that might assist in their investigation. I looked at Sarah, who was now leaning against the counter, her face buried in her hands. The silence in the kitchen was thick with despair. "Yes, detective," I said, my voice heavy. "I do." I explained what I had found. The transactions matching places Sarah and her friend Chloe had visited. The social media photo. The fact that the cards were taken from my wallet while I was at home. Making it clear this was an inside job. I didn't name Sarah directly, not yet. But I laid out the facts, letting the detective connect the dots. He asked pointed questions about who had access to my cards, who knew my habits, who I lived with. Each question was a dagger, twisting deeper into my heart. When I finished, the detective's voice was grim. "Mr. Davies, this sounds like a serious case. We'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement, and we'll need to speak with your wife." "She's here now," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She's just confessed to taking the cards." A pause on the other end. "Understood, Mr. Davies. We'll send officers to your residence immediately. Please do not discuss this further with her until they arrive." I hung up the phone. The air in the kitchen was thick, suffocating. Sarah had lifted her head, her eyes fixed on me, raw and pleading. "You told them," she choked out, her voice barely audible. "You actually told them." "I told them the truth, Sarah," I said, my voice flat. "The truth that you took my cards. The truth that you spent tens of thousands of dollars. The truth that you committed a crime, not just against me, but against the bank. Against the law." "But I didn't know you'd reported them stolen," she cried, desperation in her voice. "I didn't know it was a crime. I just thought I was using your cards. I know it was wrong, but not like this. I thought I could pay you back eventually." "Eventually?" I scoffed. "What, Sarah? You have no job. We have no savings. Our credit is destroyed. How exactly were you going to pay me back? Did you even think that far ahead? I was going to get a job," she insisted. "I was going to find something. Chloe said she knew someone who was hiring. I was going to stop spending, I swear. This was just a moment of weakness. A bad decision, not a crime." "Alex, please tell them it was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I stared at her, genuinely perplexed by her inability to grasp the enormity of her actions. "Sarah, you deliberately took my credit cards without my knowledge or permission. You then used them to buy luxury items. That's theft, and given the amounts, it's grand larceny. And then, because I had already reported them as missing, every single one of those transactions is now considered fraud. You involved your friend in this." "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is serious." "But Chloe, she told me it was okay. She said you wouldn't mind. She said it was girlfriend privileges, and that you were probably just being controlling with money." Sarah started blaming her friend, a desperate attempt to shift the responsibility. Chloe isn't your legal counsel, Sarah. Chloe is a bad influence who clearly took advantage of your insecurities and encouraged you to commit a crime. She benefited from your spending, didn't she? Did she offer to pay for anything? Did she chip in for that spa weekend? Sarah looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. Number, she just bloody enjoyed it. She said she was treating me, but it was all on your cards. But she also said you'd never find out. She said I was being silly for worrying. The anger flared again. This Chloe person was truly despicable. She hadn't just enabled Sarah. She had actively participated in the deception and the spending, likely knowing the financial strain it would cause, and pushing Sarah further into it. This is not just about the money, Sarah, I said, my voice softening slightly, though the pain was still raw. This is about trust. You broke every single bit of trust I had in you. Every promise we made. Every dream we had. How am I ever supposed to trust you again after this? How can I ever feel safe in my own home, knowing you would do this? Her tears flowed freely again. I know, Alex. I know I messed up. I truly didn't think about the consequences. I felt so small, so invisible. My friends, they all have these amazing lives, buying whatever they want. And I felt stuck. I wanted to feel powerful for once. I wanted to feel like I deserved nice things. And it was so easy. Too easy. Easy? I scoffed. You think destroying our marriage and potentially facing criminal charges is easy. The sound of a siren in the distance cut through our conversation. It grew louder, closer. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. They're here, she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the front door. They are. She took a step towards me, her hands clasped together, her face contorted in a silent plea. Alex, please. One last chance, please. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you misunderstood. I love you, Alex. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to us. My heart ached, a deep, sickening pain. The woman I loved was begging me to lie, to jeopardize my own future, to protect her from the consequences of her unforgivable actions. It was a test, and I knew what I had to do. T here is no us anymore, Sarah, I said, my voice breaking. You destroyed that when you took those cards. The siren stopped. A car door slammed shut outside, footsteps on the porch. And knock on the door. Our lives as we knew them were over. The knock on the door was sharp and authoritative, echoing through the silence of our apartment like a death knell. Sarah flinched, a small cry escaping her lips. Her eyes darted towards the door, then back to me, filled with a desperate last-ditch plea. I saw fear, yes, but also a flicker of resentment, of blame. As if I was the one bringing the police to our door, not her own actions. I walked to the door, my legs feeling heavy, as if moving through water. I opened it to find two uniformed police officers standing on our porch, their expressions calm and professional. Mr. Alex Davies, one of them asked, a woman with kind but firm eyes. I am Officer Ramirez, and this is Officer Lee. We're here regarding your fraud report. Yes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Please, come in. They entered, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere of our home. It felt less like a sanctuary, more like a crime scene. Officer Ramirez's gaze swept over the kitchen, stopping on Sarah, who was still frozen by the counter. And this is your wife, Sarah? Officer Lee asked, his voice even. I nodded. Yes, Sarah. These are the officers. They need to speak with you. Sarah looked from me to them, her face a mask of terror. She said nothing, only trembled slightly. Officer Ramirez addressed her directly. "Ma'am, your husband has filed a report regarding significant fraudulent activity on his credit cards. He has also indicated that you may have information regarding these transactions." Sarah swallowed hard. I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We understand you may have a lot of questions, ma'am," Officer Lee continued. "But for now, we'd like to invite you to the station to give a statement. We'd also like to speak with Mr. Davies separately." "No," Sarah suddenly blurted out, her voice rising in pitch. "No, I am not going anywhere. I am not a criminal. This is a misunderstanding." She looked at me, a desperate plea in her eyes. "Alex, tell them it was a mistake." Officer Ramirez stepped forward, her expression turning serious. "Ma'am, we have a clear pattern of unauthorized spending, including purchases made on cards reported stolen. Your husband has provided us with evidence linking you to these transactions. We need to follow proper procedure. If you refuse to cooperate, it could complicate matters significantly." "Cooperate?" Sarah's voice was shrill. "Cooperate with what? My own husband ruining my life?" She was no longer just sad. She was angry, and that anger was directed squarely at me. "Sarah," I said, my voice low and warning, "don't make this worse." "Worse?" she shrieked. "How could it get any worse? My own husband is turning me into the police for something I didn't even know was a crime." Officer Lee stepped between us, his posture firm. "Ma'am, please calm down. We understand this is a difficult situation, but we need to proceed. Your cooperation will be in your best interest." It was clear she wasn't going to cooperate willingly. The officers exchanged a look. "Ma'am, if you continue to obstruct this investigation, we may have no choice but to take you into custody." At the mention of custody, Sarah went completely still. Her defiance drained away, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. She slumped against the counter again, her shoulders shaking. "Okay," she whispered, barely audible. "Okay, I'll go." The officers took her statement first, in a separate room in our house. I sat in the living room, listening to the muffled voices, the occasional sob. It was excruciating. My wife, the woman I had promised to cherish, was confessing to a crime against me, just a few feet away. After about an hour, Officer Ramirez came out. Her expression was grave. "Mr. Davies, your wife has admitted to taking your cards and making the purchases. She confirms she was unaware they were reported stolen, but that doesn't change the nature of the act. Given the severity of the charges and the amounts involved, this will be handled by our fraud unit and possibly the district attorney's office. She will likely be formally charged." My stomach dropped. Formally charged. This was real. This wasn't just a threat. What does that mean for her? I asked, my voice hoarse. "That will depend on the district attorney's assessment and the evidence gathered," Officer Ramirez explained. "But it could mean significant legal consequences, including fines, restitution, and potentially jail time, especially if the amounts are as high as they appear to be. We'll also be looking into the involvement of this Chloe character." "And for me?" I asked, looking around our apartment, feeling like a stranger in my own home. "You'll need to follow up with the banks regarding the fraud claims. Since you reported the cards stolen, you shouldn't be liable for the charges. However, you'll need to cooperate fully with the investigation." "This will be a long process, Mr. Davies. And given the domestic nature of the crime, it's going to be particularly complex." Officer Lee came out then, accompanying Sarah. She wouldn't look at me. Her face was pale, her eyes red. "We're taking Mrs. Davies to the station now for formal processing," Officer Lee stated. "She will be released on her own recognizance for now, but she'll need to appear for a preliminary hearing. Can I go with her?" I asked, a flicker of the old concern for her rising up. Officer Ramirez shook her head gently. "No, Mr. Davies, she needs to go with us. You'll need to remain here. We'll be in touch." They led Sarah out, her shoulders slumped, her head bowed. As they reached the door, she finally looked at me, a silent accusation in her eyes. It was a look of utter desolation, and in that moment, despite everything, my heart broke for her. But it was a different kind of heartbreak. It was the heartbreak of finality, of an ending that was so messy, so painful, there was no way back. The door closed, and the silence in the apartment was deafening. I was alone, completely alone. My credit cards were maxed, my savings depleted. My wife was being taken away by the police, and my future was a terrifying blank slate. The life I had built, the future I had envisioned, had imploded in the span of a single afternoon. I walked back to the kitchen, the scene of our confrontation. On the counter, still sitting untouched, were the grocery bags Sarah had brought home. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, a bag of apples. Mundane, everyday items sitting next to the wreckage of our lives. The irony was gut-wrenching. I sat down at the table numb. The house felt empty, cold. The love, the laughter, the shared dreams, all of it had evaporated, replaced by a chilling void. This was the aftermath. And it was just the beginning. The days that followed blurred into a surreal, agonizing haze. I once bustling home became a tomb of silence, punctuated only by the occasional phone call from the bank, the police, or a lawyer. Sarah was out on her own recognizance, but she wasn't allowed to return to the apartment due to the ongoing investigation and the nature of the charges. She was staying with her sister, who, I gathered from a strained phone call, was furious with me for turning in her sister. My own family, when I finally managed to tell them, were a mix of shocked and sympathy. My parents were horrified, but their first concern was for me. "Alex, are you okay? Are you safe? Can you come stay with us?" I assured them I was physically fine, but emotionally I was shattered. They offered support, but I could hear the unspoken disappointment in their voices, the shattered hopes for their son's marriage. The financial reality was a brutal blow. While the bank assured me I wouldn't be liable for the fraudulent charges made on the stolen cards, the money Sarah had spent from our joint checking account using her debit card was a different story. That was considered authorized access, even if the spending was reckless and done without my knowledge. Our emergency fund was gone, the down payment for our dream house vanished. I had to scramble to cover our upcoming bills, dipping into my meager personal saving. My credit score, once impeccable, was now a disaster area. Not because of the fraudulent charges, which were being sorted out, but because of the massive debt incurred and the ongoing investigation. Work became an escape, but even there I felt the weight of it all. I was constantly distracted, making mistakes, barely able to focus. My boss, usually understanding, started to give me pointed looks. I knew I couldn't explain the full truth without potentially jeopardizing my job, given the sensitive nature of the fraud. The ripple effect spread to our social circle too. Sarah's friends, the ones she had been so desperate to impress, quickly distanced themselves. Chloe, the supposed instigator, completely disappeared. She didn't answer Sarah's calls, and when I tried to contact her, she blocked my number. It became clear that Chloe had simply used Sarah's insecurities to get freebies and a good time. Abandoning her the moment real consequences appeared. Sarah was left alone, facing the music, while Chloe walked away scot-free, undoubtedly finding a new mark. Sarah tried to call me a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I felt a confusing mix of anger, grief, and a strange sense of emptiness. What was there to say? Every conversation felt like rehashing the same painful ground. Her apologies felt hollow now, drowned out by the magnitude of her betrayal. My lawyer, a stoic woman named Miss Chen, explained the complexities. Mr. Davies, while you are the victim of the fraud, the fact that the alleged perpetrator is your spouse complicates things. The prosecution will consider several factors. The amount of money involved, whether there was any prior history or financial disputes, and your willingness to cooperate. Because you reported the cards stolen before she used them. It helps your case significantly, as it proves she was using genuinely stolen instruments, not just abusing a joint account. However, her defense will likely argue she had implied access, or that she genuinely didn't know they were stolen in the legal sense. She took them from my wallet, I emphasized, without my permission. She confessed to that. Yes, and that's critical, Miss Chen confirmed. But the legal system is often about intent. Her defense will claim a lack of criminal intent, focusing on her ignorance about the cards being reported stolen. It's going to be messy, Mr. Davies, and long. Thought of a long, drawn-out legal battle filled me with dread. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to heal. But there was no shortcut to any of this. One evening, unable to bear the silence of the apartment any longer, I went for a long walk. I ended up in the park where Sarah and I used to spend our weekends, dreaming about our future. We talked about kids, about travel, about growing old together in this city. Now those dreams felt like phantom limbs, painful reminders of something that was no longer there. I thought about Sarah, about the woman I fell in love with. She was vibrant, funny, full of life. But somewhere along the way she had changed. Or maybe I had just missed the signs. The subtle hints of discontent, the growing desire for things we couldn't afford, the increasing influence of her new superficial friends. Had I been too focused on work? Had I not listened enough? The self-doubt gnawed at me. Was there anything I could have done differently? But then I reminded myself, even if there were issues in our marriage, nothing, absolutely nothing, justified what she did. She chose to violate my trust in the most profound way. She chose to steal from me. She chose to risk my financial stability and her own freedom. Her choices, not mine, had led us here. A few days later, I received a court summons. It was for Sarah's preliminary hearing. I was listed as a key witness. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. The public spectacle of our private tragedy. Sarah's sister called again, furious. How could you, Alex? Are you really going to stand there in court and testify against Sarah? Your wife? She's distraught. She's lost everything. She's blaming herself, and you are just making it worse. She lost everything because of her own actions. I said, my voice firm. And I lost everything too. Our savings, our trust, our marriage. I have to do this for myself. The truth needs to come out. You are heartless, she screamed before hanging up. I stood there holding the dead phone, feeling a strange mixture of numbness and resolve. Heartless? Maybe. But what was the alternative? To let her get away with it? To sacrifice my own future for her mistakes? None of this was about accountability. This was about reclaiming my life, piece by painful piece. The heartbreak was still there, a constant ache. but underneath it, a tiny ember of strength was beginning to glow. I was a victim, yes, but I wouldn't be a doormat. Courthouse felt cold and imposing, a stark contrast to the warmth of the life I once shared with Sarah. I sat on a hard bench in the hallway, waiting for the preliminary hearing to begin. Every person who walked by seemed to eye me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if my personal tragedy was on public display. Miss Chen, my lawyer, sat beside me, reviewing her notes. Remember, Alex, just stick to the facts. Answer truthfully. Don't let her lawyer bait you. This is purely to determine if here is enough evidence for a trial. Enough evidence. I had provided plenty. My statements, the bank records, the social media posts, Sarah's own confession to the police. It felt surreal that I was here, about to testify against my wife. Sarah walked in then, flanked by her own lawyer, a stern-faced woman in a dark suit. Sarah looked pale and thin, her eyes still red-rimmed. She was dressed in simple, somber clothes, a stark contrast to the designer labels she'd splurged on. Her gaze met mine for a fleeting moment, and I saw a flash of anger, then deep sadness, and finally, a profound sense of resignation. She looked away first. The hearing began. Prosecutor laid out the state's case, detailing the amounts, the fraudulent nature of the purchases, the timeline of the stolen card reports. It was clinical, factual, stripped of all emotion, which made it all the more chilling. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand, swore to tell the truth, and then recounted the events of the past few weeks. I explained how I noticed the original cards missing and reported them stolen, how the new cards arrived, how I put them in my wallet, how I later discovered the massive unauthorized charges, how I confirmed with the bank that these were made on the new cards after the initial report. And then, the painful revelation of confronting Sarah and her confession. Sarah's lawyer cross-examined me, attempting to poke holes in my testimony. Mr. Davies, isn't it true that you and your wife had ongoing financial disagreements? Yes, we discussed our budget sometimes, I admitted, like any couple. And isn't it true that your wife often expressed feeling neglected or unappreciated in your relationship? I don't believe that's relevant to the charges of theft and fraud, I stated, following Miss Chen's advice. Mr. Davies, did you not, on occasion, give your wife permission to use your credit cards for household expenses or personal treats? Not for tens of thousands of dollars in luxury items, taken without my knowledge. So you are saying your wife deliberately set out to steal from you, knowing these cards were stolen in a legal sense? The lawyer pressed, trying to imply Sarah's ignorance was a defense. I can only speak to my actions. I reported the cards as stolen. She then took them and used them, unaware of that fact. The bank flagged them as fraud, I stated, carefully choosing my words. Whether she intended to commit fraud or not, she did take my cards without permission, and she spent money that was not authorized. The lawyer tried to paint Sarah as a confused, naive woman, manipulated by her friends rather than a calculating criminal. She emphasized Sarah's genuine shock when she learned I had reported the cards stolen. It was clear their strategy was to argue for a lesser charge, or at least leniency, based on a lack of full criminal intent. Sarah's testimony followed. She echoed her lawyer's narrative, portraying herself as a victim of her own insecurities and Chloe's bad influence. She broke down sobbing, multiple times expressing deep remorse. I just wanted to feel pretty, she choked out at one point. I just wanted to fit in. I never meant to hurt Alex. I love him. Hearing her say, I love him, felt like a gut punch. It was a knife twist in an already gaping wound. Did she truly love me? Or was it just a desperate plea for sympathy? I couldn't tell anymore. The judge, a stern but fair woman, listened intently to all the arguments. After a brief recess, she returned to deliver her decision. Based on the evidence presented, including the victim's testimony, the bank records, and the defendant's own admissions, there is sufficient probable cause to proceed with a criminal trial. The defendant, Sarah Davies, will be formally charged with grand larceny and multiple counts of credit card fraud. A collective gasp went through the small courtroom. Sarah's face crumpled, and she buried her face in her hands. Her lawyer put a comforting arm around her, but her expression was grim. The judge then set a date for the trial and outlined the bail conditions. Sarah was released on bail, but with strict conditions, including no contact with me, and a restraining order to keep her away from the apartment. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the moment pressed down on me. It was done. The legal process had begun, and it felt both like a relief and a crushing blow. I had done what was necessary, what was right for me, but the cost was immense. My marriage was definitively over, now cemented not just by betrayal, but by legal charges. Miss Chen walked beside me. "That was good, Alex. You were clear and concise. The prosecution has a strong case. What happens now?" I asked, looking out at the city streets, which seemed so indifferent to the turmoil within me. Now the waiting game for the trial begins. It could be months. In the meantime, you need to focus on rebuilding your life. And we can also begin the divorce proceedings. Divorce. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. It was an inevitable consequence, but hearing it spoken aloud in the context of a criminal trial made it feel even more devastating. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an unraveling, thread by painful thread, of everything we had built. And I was left standing in the ruins picking up the pieces, alone. The heartbreak continued, a constant companion, but now mixed with a burgeoning sense of resolve. I had survived the first legal battle. I would survive the rest. The months that followed the preliminary hearing were a slow, agonizing process of untangling my life from Sarah's. The legal proceedings moved at a glacial pace, a constant reminder of the painful reality I was living. Sarah pleaded not guilty, claiming her actions were due to a misunderstanding and severe emotional distress, fueled by external manipulation. It meant a full trial, dragging out the agony even longer. My finances were still a mess. While the fraudulent charges on the reported stolen cards were eventually removed from my credit report, the money taken from our joint checking account was not. That debt was mine to bear. I took on extra shifts at work, cutting back on every non-essential expense. The dream of a house, of starting a family, felt like a distant, cruel memory. My credit score, once my pride, was in shambles, making it impossible to get any loans or even a decent credit card again for a long time. The divorce proceedings began simultaneously. It was another layer of emotional exhaustion. Sarah, through her lawyer, tried to claim various assets, even hinting at alimony despite her actions. My lawyer quickly shut that down. The evidence of her financial misdeeds, coupled with the ongoing criminal case, worked heavily against her in the divorce court. It was a bitter, painful fight, laying bare all the resentments and secrets that had festered beneath the surface of our marriage. Sarah's friends, especially Chloe, vanished completely. Sarah's sister, after the initial fury, distanced herself too, seemingly overwhelmed by the legal and financial mess Sarah had created. Sarah was truly isolated, facing the consequences alone. I heard through the grapevine that she was struggling, living with an aunt, unable to find work due to her pending legal troubles. A part of me, the old Alex, felt a pang of sympathy. But the current Alex, the one who had seen his life upended, quickly suppressed it. She had made her choices. I found myself leaning heavily on my own family and a few close friends. They listened, offered practical help, and mostly just showed up. Their unwavering support was a lifeline in the stormy seas of my life. My best friend Mark would often just come over, order pizza, and we'd watch a movie, not talking about the case, just existing in a space of normalcy. It was in these quiet moments that I slowly, painstakingly, began to heal. The anger was still there, a simmering resentment, but it was slowly giving way to a profound sadness. Sadness for the life we had lost, for the person Sarah had become, for the dreams that had been shattered. I grieved not just for my marriage, but for the fundamental betrayal of trust that had irrevocably altered my view of the world. During one of the many therapy sessions I started attending, my therapist, Dr. Hayes, helped me navigate the complex emotions. "Alex," she said, "you are experiencing a form of grief, not just for the loss of your marriage, but for the loss of your sense of security, your financial stability, and your understanding of a person you deeply loved. It's important to allow yourself to feel all these emotions, but also to recognize that you are not responsible for Sarah's choices. You acted with integrity, even when it was incredibly painful." Her words resonate. It helps me differentiate between the grief for what was lost and the anger at the perpetrator. They were intertwined, but not the same. As the trial date approached, the prosecution offered Sarah a plea deal. If she pleaded guilty, they would recommend a lesser sentence, perhaps probation and mandatory restitution, avoiding jail time. It was a lifeline, a chance for her to avoid the full weight of the law. I didn't know if she would take it. I wrestled with my own feelings about it. Part of me wanted her to face the full consequences, for justice to be served. Another part, the exhausted part, just wanted it all to be over, for the entire painful chapter to close. The day before the trial was set to begin, I received a call from Miss Chen. "Alex, Sarah's lawyer, just called. She's decided to take the plea deal. She's pleading guilty to reduced charges." A wave of complex emotions washed over me. Relief, yes, that the trial was off, but also a strange disappointment that there wouldn't be a definitive verdict, a public acknowledgement of the full extent of her actions. Still, it was closure of a sort. The final court appearance was brief. Sarah, looking even more gaunt than before, stood before the judge. She quietly entered her plea of guilty. The judge reviewed the terms of the plea agreement. 5 years of probation, mandatory restitution of the funds taken from the joint account, though the likelihood of me ever seeing that money was slim, given her financial counseling. There was no jail time, much to my mixed emotions. She looked at me briefly across the courtroom as the judge finalized the sentence. Her eyes held a deep sadness, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps remorse, perhaps regret, perhaps even a silent plea for forgiveness. I just nodded. A slight, almost imperceptible movement. There was nothing left to say. Our story was over. Our shared chapter was closed, sealed by a judge's gavel and the crushing weight of betrayal. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt lighter than I had in months. The knot of tension in my stomach had loosened. The constant hum of anxiety in my head had quieted. It wasn't happiness, not by a long shot, but it was a fragile sense of peace. The legal battle was over. The divorce would follow, a formality at this point. I was free, in a painful, expensive way, to begin again. The heartbreak would remain, a scar on my soul, but it no longer defined me. I was ready to start the difficult, long road to recovery, to rebuild my life, one step at a time. Final divorce papers arrived 2 months after Sarah's sentencing. Signing them felt both liberating and incredibly sad. It was the last official tie, the final severing of a bond that had once meant everything. Our once shared home was now just mine. I spent weeks decluttering, removing every trace of Sarah that felt like a painful memory. Her clothes, her books, her little trinkets, all packed away for donation or given to her sister. It was an arduous process, each item a small stab to the heart, but it was necessary for me to move forward. Financially, the road was long and steep. The debt from the drained joint account was a heavy burden, but I tackled it with grim determination. I stuck to a strict budget, cooked all my meals at home, and picked up every freelance gig I could find. Slowly, painstakingly, my savings began to rebuild, $1 at a time. My credit score was slowly improving, a testament to my discipline. It was a daily grind, a constant reminder of what had happened, but also a symbol of my resilience. Emotionally, the healing was even more complex. The initial shock and anger had faded, replaced by a deep melancholy. There were days when the loneliness was overwhelming, when the silence in the apartment echoed with ghosts of laughter and whispered promises. I missed the companionship, the shared life, even the mundane routines of a marriage. But I never, not once, missed the fear, the distrust, the constant anxiety that had slowly poisoned our relationship. My therapy sessions continued, providing a safe space to process the trauma. Dr. Hayes helped me understand that, while Sarah's actions were inexcusable, the underlying issues in our marriage, the communication gaps, the unmet needs, the external pressures, had contributed to a fertile ground for such a betrayal. It wasn't an excuse for her crime, but it was a lesson for me. I learned to identify my own blind spots, to recognize red flags, and to prioritize open communication in future relationships. I also learned to forgive, not for Sarah's sake, but for my own. Not to condone her actions, but to release the heavy burden of resentment and anger that was holding me back. Forgiveness, I realized, was an act of self-preservation, a way to reclaim my own peace. My relationship with my family deepened. They were my rock, providing unwavering support and reminding me that I was not alone. My friends, especially Mark, became even closer. We spent more time together, doing simple things, rebuilding a sense of community around me. I started taking up old hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage: hiking, photography, playing my guitar. These activities, once luxuries I couldn't afford financially or emotionally, became vital sources of joy and self-discovery. They reminded me of who I was before the heartbreak and who I could become now. 1 year after the initial discovery, I received a small, unexpected check in the mail. It was a partial payment for the restitution from Sarah, forwarded by the court. It was a tiny fraction of what was owed, but it was a tangible sign that she was perhaps taking responsibility, or at least attempting to. It didn't change anything, but it marked a small moment of acknowledgement. I never heard directly from Sarah again. Our paths diverged completely. I didn't seek updates on her life, and she didn't attempt to contact me. Chapter of our lives together was closed, the book sealed. Looking back, the entire experience was devastating. It stripped me bare, financially and emotionally, but it also forged me anew. I learned about resilience, about the importance of trust, about the true cost of betrayal. I learned that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to genuine freedom. My heart was still broken in a way. The scars remained, a constant reminder of the pain, but it was no longer a fresh wound. It was a healed scar, a testament to what I had survived. I was stronger, wiser, and more self-reliant than I had ever been. Life was still uncertain, but the fear was gone, replaced by a quiet optimism. I was rebuilding brick by painful brick. A new life for myself. A life built on honesty, integrity, and self-respect. The heartbreak was a part of my story, but it was no longer the whole story. I was Alex, and I was moving forward, one step at a time, towards a future that was finally truly my own.